And then sophomores, I don't know what they do. Don't they do like what did you guys do last year during the SAT?
This is a normal day, I think.
Yeah, it was a normal day.
It can't be a normal day because it can't be because there's people in. Because basically the whole first half, it's 4 hours. So from like 8 to 12, this whole place is locked down. The PSAT? ISATs.
We're done with those.
That's right, you had yeah. Or, yeah, and then after lunch there was like a activity thing. Yes. Yes. I remember that. Okay, and it was the ISAT you were taking? Do they still have ISATs?
Till 10th grade.
For sophomores? Okay, so they'll be in tests, you guys will be in tests, seniors just don't show up, and we take the freshmen away, which is good for you, because nobody wants them here. Do what? Seniors did. Yeah. Okay.
What?
I'd rather proctor an SAT.
Or after SATs?
Just saying, so
Because none of the seniors had to go to school, so she
Huh.
I remember.
All right, can I show you some examples here? What this is like some examples from each section to try and show you just in terms of like format, how the questions are going to be phrased and stuff like that. And you guys, we're going to see so many practice questions you're going to want to throw up by the time we get to April 11th, but this is like a decent example in the beginning. So this is an example from the evidence-based reading and writing section. Okay, remember that evidence-based part. And this is a good example of how they're going to get you to show evidence. Okay, so question 3 might be, if you can read that, this would be after you're reading a passage. Question 3 says, the passage most clearly implies that other people regarded Lady Carlotta as A, outspoken, B, tactful, C, ambitious, D, unfriendly. You would have to choose which one you think it is. And then question 4 follows it right up by saying, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Lines 10 through 14, lines 22 through 20, did you kind of see what I'm saying? You have to say where you got the evidence for the answer that you just gave. And most of the reading section is going to be similar to that. Does that make sense? Okay, here's the other thing that upsets me a little bit about the reading section is this is the old opinion versus fact argument. There's a lot of personal opinion kind of questions on the SAT. Example. This would be on the reading test after they give you 2 passages, and it could be a paragraph each, or it could be several paragraphs each, it kind of depends. But number 30 says, which choice best describes the relationship between the 2 passages? And it makes you say how they're related, if at all. And then 31 says, on which of the following points would the authors of both passages most likely agree? So this, do you kind of see what I'm saying? That they're asking you about the author's motivations and their intentions and their feelings, which you clearly have no way of knowing, but you're supposed to infer that from the passages themselves. Okay. The other thing that I'm going to tell you, again, not trying to scare you, just trying to be realistic here. The reading passages on the SAT are huge. Huge. Not paragraphs. You just, I mean, we're gonna look at practice tests, but like you scroll and dude, you just keep scrolling. Like they're real long. And it's not the kind of thing where there's some questions where it says like, in line 14, and you're like, yes, because then you don't read anything else, you just go to line 14, right? And then you see what that means. Yeah, that's how you answer those. There's other questions like this, where they'll say like, what were the author's motivations for writing the piece? Or what did the author mean in his entire conclusion, which was like 6 paragraphs long? And you're like, oh my God. So you actually do have to read the entire thing word for word, because there are questions they're gonna ask you, stuff like that. So it's like for my babies that like aren't good readers, and again, it's something to do with intelligence. It just means they're slow readers. If you're a slow reader, this kind of inherently gives you a disadvantage, because this whole thing is timed and the passages are long. Okay? An example of a passage. Just go ahead and read that for a second. This is an excerpt of a passage. It's not the whole thing. Sorry. Okay. How do you feel about the passage? Thoughts? Anybody? My first thought was there's some big ass words in there. Like right off the bat, there's some really big words. That, to be honest, for a lot of my juniors, I'm not sure if they would know. I'm not sure if people know what inquisitor means. I'm not sure if my kids know what hyperbole is. That whole sentence, and hyperbole would not be fictional. It would not overstate the solemnness that I feel right now. Like, stop it. That's unnecessarily big and complicated. An idle spectator, diminution, subversion, jurisdiction, misconduct. You kind of see what I'm saying? There's a lot of words in there that for a lot of my juniors might be difficult to recognize. And for my juniors who would have trouble with those words, here's what I'm going to go ahead and guess happens. And that passage that's abbreviated, which means that's probably 10 times longer than that. You look at how long that passage is, you read the first few sentences, see all those big words that you may or may not recognize, and for a lot of my kids, they stop right there. And they'll go, ha, nope, AC/DC. For that whole section, because I'm not reading all that stuff and struggling over this and trying to figure out what these words mean. Like, that is like soul crushing for a lot of my kids. This is one of the reasons why this test is sensitive. But this is a good example of the fact that this might be exactly what you see, and it might have way bigger words in there, and you still gotta stick with it and struggle through the whole thing and try and figure out what those words mean, and the question's probably gonna ask you. So this is just an example of the kind of like level of writing that we're talking about here. This is one of these simpler excerpts that I've seen off the SAT, and you'll see when we get to the practice ones. And then this would be like an example of a question they would ask you about that passage. The question would be, the main rhetorical effect of the series of 3 phrases in lines 5 through 6 is to what? Which, right off the bat, rhetorical effect? For a lot of my juniors, they might not know what that means, and therefore you don't even know what the question is asking you, much less how to answer it. And I don't like that either. Convey with increasing intensity. It's just that thing that's like, gosh darn it. I feel like it's harder than it has to be. For the writing and the language test, there's going to be examples here that again are talking about revising and editing. You are not writing on the writing portion. Does that make sense? I know that isn't necessarily like logical. You're writing in the essay portion. All the writing portion questions are multiple choice. Okay, again, and in a lot of cases, they're going to have some kind of visual aid, table, chart, graph, something like that. This would be an example of a writing and language sample question. So you see they give you that whole passage, right? And then you see that one chunk of a line that's underlined, and they're asking you if that's right. So your options down below where it says number 2 is A means it's correct, it's written correctly. And then B, C, D would be options for how it should be written if it's written incorrectly. Does that make sense? To be honest, that paragraph's, you don't need all that. It's making you read unnecessary things. You don't even need the entire sentence, really. You just need like that chunk. But that whole paragraph definitely is unnecessary. You don't need to read it all. You just need to read the underlying part. The essay portion,